Why do you think people get stuck on that? Like, because people love to play almost like the victim, and it's almost like they like
you've answered your own question. Yeah. I think therapy perpetuates it, right? I think if you go to therapy, tell me about your problems, right? If you ever read Inside Out Thinking, Sydney Banks, right? He talks about going to therapy is like going into the shower to dry off. It ain't going to fucking work.
Welcome to the Prime Life Project Podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to another episode of the Prime Life Project Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and today, to say that I've got a treat is an absolute understatement. I've got a gentleman here today that has quite literally changed my life, and to share him with you is going to be an absolute privilege. So the fee for today is, if you're new to the podcast, you take any value from this episode, please like and share it with a friend. Help us to spread the word to help as many people as possible. So my guest today is Dr. Andy Cope. He's just finished a 12-year university PhD at Loughborough University. And for me, his whole thing with this is, he agrees with me on this. In a time of rising depression and an epidemic of anxiety, Andy believes there's never been a more appropriate time to raise the wellbeing agenda. He founded the Art of Brilliance in 2004, and his aim is to blaze a new trail, one that is non-academic, totally rooted in the real world, and would make a massive and immediate impact on individuals and organizations. He's written several books, which are all bestsellers: The Art of Being Brilliant, Be Brilliant Every Day, Shine for Adults, and then also The Art of Being Brilliant for Teenagers and The Diary of a Brilliant Kid. I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Dr. Andy Cope.
Mate, it's a pleasure. It's actually a privilege, dude. And we just have a little chat off air, right? And I'll just admit that I hadn't listened to the podcast, but I've been binge listening, right, since you've invited me on. And you don't need a guest. You are very good just having a rant all on your own about stuff that really, really switches you on. And we're in the same business, mate. We're in the business of trying to get people to be their best self, aren't we?
And that's the interesting thing with this, like your original book, which I've got here next to me, The Art of Being Brilliant. So first and foremost, if you haven't read this book, The Art of Being Brilliant, this was the first ever self-help book that I read. And for me, the way that you as an author write is unreal, because you use humor. You take something that is so deep, so misunderstood. And as we saw alluded to before, the gurus try and spin this thing on it and sell you to go stand up a mountain and do all this craziness. And you just make it funny. You make it funny, you use humor, and you break it down so people understand it. And if people don't know this, in order to work with me, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. Like, I either give it to you or you have to go and buy it. That is how much this book means to me. So this gentleman here, and I just wanted to say to you, Andy, do you actually understand the impact that you have on people's lives? Because I don't think that you do.
Mate.
Because people buy this, I give people this book, and they'll say, I've given it to my friend. And I'm like, fucking hell. And so that's just not me giving them the book and they're reading it because Dan says so. That's them reading the book then helping them, and then passing it forward. So I just want to ask you, do you actually know the impact you have on people's lives?
Mate, that's a very humbling question, and I'm very lucky that people do stay in touch with me, and some of the workshops and the books do make a huge difference. However, if I ever want to feel down, I can go on Amazon and look at my 1-star reviews, mate. Not everybody likes what I write about, and some people think it's too simple. Some people don't like the humor. Some people think you shouldn't be sort of even trying to be humorous about. And it's not a funny subject. I'm talking about your well-being. I'm talking about your mental health. It's actually really serious. But I always think if you can entertain people first and get them reading it, and they might accidentally learn something along the way, that's a better way of, rather than trying to prove. I spent 12 years in academia, fella. I've spent 12 years learning big words and writing academic nonsense that nobody read. It's just not interesting. So what the Art of Being Brilliant is trying to lose all the big stuff and just boil it down to the basics of how we can feel great in a world that's hell-bent on knocking it out of us at the moment.
Because that's the thing for me with it. I've probably read this book 10 times. And by the way, the audiobook, I don't know who you picked for it, but they are brilliant because they bring the humor to it. They are literally hilarious as you're listening to the audiobook. But my point with this is the journey that I've gone on with self-development and all that sort of stuff, and all the course I've been on, blah, 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 blah. I will then go back to this book and I'll learn something new each time I read it. Now, even you mentioned Richard Wilkins a lot in this with and again, I've done his course.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize he was mentioned in his book until probably the 8th time I'd read it. That's how much you can pick from it each time. Now, with this, we're going to cover a lot today about your new book, which is called The Happiness Revolution. And by the way, I'm not trying to plug any of his books, but if you're struggling, and people that are my audience, you know that I never push anything on this show. But the fact that I'm telling you that my clients have to read this guy's book, it tells you how much I mean. And the fact that I buy the book to give it to people tells you, just read his fucking books, okay? Just read his fucking books. Now, this one, fuck, mate, you've outdone yourself. And I mean that sincerely. But I just want to talk about you for a second, because we've got your books. We're going to dive into them. How did you get into this industry and become a doctor of happiness? Because that's a really weird thing to want to become.
It is a very weird thing, mate. And it doesn't even exist really as a thing when I set out to be it. There is no such thing as a doctor of happiness. Except, well, there is now. Essentially, I studied psychology, mate. Like most people do, is you go to uni, study psychology, phobias, disorders, anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff. So every lecture I ever attended was named after an illness, and there was never a single lecture on happiness or well-being or how to feel good. It was always about, let's spot people who are not feeling good, and then we can diagnose it and put them right. And I get that. I understand that. I think that's wonderful. But if you trace psychology back to day one, it's nearly 150 years old now, is traditional psychology has always been predicated on that illness model. Let's find out what's wrong. Here's some therapy, here's some counseling, here's some meds. And while I doff my cap to the people who were able to do that, despite the best efforts of 150 years of research, fella, despite the best efforts of medication and therapy, mental ill health has got worse, not better during that time. So for me, there was something's missing. We are missing a trick. And what I realized was that literally forever since psychology has been invented, psychologists have never ever studied happy people or people who are already feeling amazing on the grounds of these people not being ill. Right. So because they're not ill and they've got a smile on their face, nobody's worried about them and there's no medication or therapy for them. So I decided to flip psychology on its head and do like a proper academic research study of everybody listening to this podcast can think of a handful, as probably a single handful of people in their life who've got something extra. So it's an extra smile, an extra passion for life, an extra positivity, extra something. In the workplace, these are the people who go the extra mile. And what I'm saying is psychology's missed those people for 150 years. So I decided to give them a warm embrace and try and find out 3 things that go into the books and the workshops. Who the heck are they? Because we didn't even know the answer to that. Secondly, what are happy people doing that allows them to feel happy? And crucially, mate, the bit hopefully that you catch on to is what can we then learn from them that we can apply in our own lives, so it just nudges us to having a better chance of having a better day as well. And that's basically it. I just came at it from thinking, oh my gosh, there's actually a science there about happy people. Why did I never covered that before? Why was there no lectures on that at uni when I was at uni? So I threw myself into it. It took me 12 years, got a PhD in it, and now that's what I do.
Did you get quite a bit of kickback from the typical community thinking you're a bit nuts of why you're doing that? Or
I still get kickback. I get kickback, mate. Not every, as soon as you announce yourself as a doctor of happiness, you've got to be prepared for some shit.
Did you just carry your PhD certificate around with you?
I do. I tell people, like, I know Doctor of Happiness is cheesy, but it's slightly better than Doctor Feel Good, which is creepy. So I'll stick with Doctor Happy. But the kickback is, right, I deliver conferences, keynotes at conferences. I deliver psychology conferences sometimes, and there's always a big group of traditional psychologists out there who they don't like me. They're like, you're wasting your time. What are you studying happiness for? What's the point of that? These people don't need any help. And Dan, that's the point. That is the point. These people don't need any help. So surely there's something we can learn from them. So we might not need so much help either. It's beyond obvious, fella, but but for 150 years, nobody's done it. So I decided to do it. And
that's what I like about you. And again, you mentioned this in multiple things in your book. Basically, what you do is you take things that are common sense, but aren't common practice, and make them easy for people to understand. And that's what I like. It's common sense stuff. People aren't going to read your book and be like, oh, didn't know that. No. But they'll read it and be like, oh, and it's almost like a light bulb moment of, why aren't I doing this? I call it personal remembering, mate. I don't call it personal development. I can't remember when I started calling it that, but a couple of books in, I'm going, there's nothing new here. No, I can't teach you anything new about happiness, but I can get you to remember about you at your best, because we're all at our best occasionally. We tend to reserve it for special occasions. I'll be happy at the weekend. I'll be happy when I retire. I'll be happy on a hot date. I'll be happy when I'm on my summer holiday. And really, a lot of what we're talking about is people are accidentally kicking their happiness into the future, into the long grass.
I mean, I did a session with some firefighters, right, pre-pandemic. I think you can retire as a firefighter when you're 52 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this young lad there, he's about 30, only 22 more years to go. And I go, what do you mean? Well, I can retire in 22 years and then I'll be happy. And I'm like, bloody hell, mate. He's like putting his happiness off for 2 decades. And I don't think you have to be like that. I think you can learn. The thing about positive psychology is very simple. And once you've learned it and you do it, then you can learn to be happy today. I mean, there's a radical idea.
But that's the thing. I think you hit the nail on the head there. One of the biggest things is that for me, I say to people aren't broken and they don't need fixing. People just need to find themselves, love themselves, and forgive themselves. That's what they need to do. And it's one of the hardest things ever. It sounds really simple, but it is what it is. And then you hit another thing, and this is where people come to see me all the time. And I've mentioned this multiple times on my podcast. If you like my rants, you'll have heard me rant about this multiple times. Is when I get X, then I'll be happy. And it's like, especially people come to me. So I'll be like, when I get a 6-pack, when I get a big bum, whatever it is. But you won't, because then your eyes will be the wrong color, or your elbows will be too bony, or you'll be too short, and you look for something else you then can't control, which will make you more miserable. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with some stuff in the book here about basically people living for the weekend. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, I was a bit shocked about some of the stats in your book about when you say people are perfectly fine and how most people rate themselves 6.5 to 7.5 out of 10 on a happiness scale. That shocked me. That seemed very high.
Yes, that was pre-pandemic. I don't know what the latest stats are, but yeah, most people there's a saying in positive psychology, most people are mildly happy most of the time, at least in the UK. So we've got a decent standard of living, we've got an infrastructure that is conducive to living a happy life, and yet it's not about what's going on out there, mate. It's about what's going on in here. As you understand it, right? You get it intuitively, but not everybody does. Let me tell you my epiphany moment, right? Because it's a bit of a story, but and I think it's in one of the books somewhere. But I don't know if you've ever had an epiphany where just the world became abundantly clear in a nanosecond.
Yep.
I think you supposed to have them in church. Mine was in Tesco's in Ashby-de-la-Zouch, right? About 9 years ago. And I was just doing the weekly shop in Tesco's, and I had this sudden whoosh of realization or epiphany or enlightenment. I don't know what it was, right? But I just realized all of a sudden that wherever I go, I'm there. Right. And I know that's obvious. And I know I already knew that. And I know all your listeners already know that. But I'm talking like at a laser-like level of precision and clarity in that moment. It's like, oh my gosh, bloody hell, I'm in Tesco's in Ashby-de-la-Zouch. That is amazing. Then I got through the checkout. I was driving home in my car going, oh my gosh, I'm in my actual car driving home from Tesco's. Then I got back to my house going, oh, I'm in my kitchen. I'm actually in my kitchen. Put my groceries away. So the point being, right, because I know you're kind of into Buddhism and stuff like that, is the point being that I realized in that moment that I can't get away from me, right? I am stuck with me, mate, 24/7. We talk about lockdown. Oh, we've been locked down for a year and a half. No, you've bloody not. You've been locked down with yourself forever. For every single heartbeat of your entire life, you're locked down with you. Now, I can put my trainers on and run across the garden, but I'm still stuck with me. And you're stuck with you, and your listeners are stuck with them. So therefore, the learning for me was this. It's like, oh my gosh, if I can't get away from me, and I'm trapped with me for a lifetime, it all of a sudden made perfect sense. I may as well be trapped with a version of me that I'm proud of, right? Or I may as well be trapped with a version of me that's got a smile on his face and some confidence and some passion for life and some optimism, some hope, rather than the version of me previously that I didn't have much of that, mate. I was a bit wishy-washy, really. I didn't have that. And you know, everybody listening to this, you're trapped with yourself, but being trapped with yourself is really good. If you're trapped with the best version of you, then it's a pleasure and it's a joy to be with yourself, and it's a joy for other people to be with you. But you can get stuck in being mediocre. You can get just trapped in this mood hoover zone where you just averageness is coming out your pores, and we don't want that, do we? You can get stuck there.
You mentioned mood hoovers. I did a whole episode on mood hoovers.
I'll have a listen to that.
And again, I got that just from you. Now, that's a very interesting thing that you've mentioned there. And again, I hope the audience just takes the time to understand what Andy's just said there, because that is the key thing. You can't escape you. And we weren't going to go down this path, but I'd love to talk about identity. Now, this is the thing for me. Like when it comes to identity, we've spoken about this numerous times on the podcast. You can't serve two masters. It says that in the Bible. Again, go check it out. You can't serve two masters. And what that means is there's the old version of you and the new version of you. And at the minute, as Andy's saying, what kind of version are you? Are you proud of yourself or are you not proud of yourself? If you're not proud of yourself and you're this version of you, right, you have to let that go to become the new version of you. Now, how do people do that? Because this is the key thing here. You mentioned it in your new book, The Happiness Revolution, about one of your colleagues went to India and sat up in a mountain. And
that was me, mate. That was me. Now, I went to India. But
you went to India?
I went to India. Yeah.
Who went to Ipswich?
Paul McGee. So I wrote a book with Paul McGee called The Happiness Revolution. He stayed at home in Warrington.
Right, okay. Oh, so it's both you guys. See,
and I went to India. Went to India, right, for 3 months. I jacked my job in. This was like just before the pandemic. I have a feeling I actually started the pandemic. I came back from India just before it. Anyway, I am the Indian variant.
I was going to say you're the original Delta.
Anyway,
again, you're going to get the podcast banned now because you've used that terminology.
I jacked it in 2019. I've done 30 years of. I love my job, but 30 years of doing stuff, and I thought I just need a break. I've always fancied going to India, and my wife didn't fancy it, so I went. And because Louise wasn't there, I didn't have to stay in posh hotels. It was just me, getting a bit skanky with a black backpack, traveling through India. The aim was to go up into the Himalayas, into a town called Rishikesh, which is a very holy place. It's supposed to be the holiest city in the world, holiest town in the world, on the Ganges, in the foothills of the Himalayas. Absolutely gorgeous place. And I was going to stay in an ashram, which is basically a monastery, a holy place. Yeah. And I was going to sit with my legs crossed for 3 months, grow a goatee, learn all about Buddhism, Hinduism, mindfulness, come back enlightened. And just came back with dysentery, essentially. But I learned loads of stuff there. But about identity, is, I would say, and physical fitness is an interesting one, because this is what changed for me. I had to learn to be a different version of me, a new, improved version of me. And I mean, when I talk about changing your identity, I don't mean literally going to Peterborough to the passport office and going, I want to be, Peter K. I'm talking about, for me, let me give you an example. In terms of physical fitness, I had to change my identity to become the kind of person who looks after their physical self. So I've been on diets, mate. Like most of the people come to you, I've been on a diet, I've tried everything. I've tried shakes, I've tried everything. I've battled with my weight for years and years and years. I've tried everything, nothing worked. The only way that I'm now kind of feel totally happy with myself is that I'm in a position where I have become the kind of person who looks after his physical health. That change of identity has made, I've not had to diet. I don't have to try to eat healthy anymore, because I'm the kind of person who looks after their physical health. Means it's the most natural thing in the world to eat good food most of the time. Instead of having to force myself to go out for a run or a bike ride like I used to, oh, it's raining, I can't be bothered. I am now changing my identity. I've become the kind of person who looks after their physical health. Going out for a run in the drizzle is the most natural thing in the world. I'm not fighting, I'm not battling it. I'm enjoying it. And that's such a massive change from, I used to be the kind of person I'm the kind of person who struggles with their weight. And now I'm the kind of person who looks after their physical health. That change in sentence has made all the effort just disappear, and it just becomes, but I've changed my identity. And that's what you're talking about. And that's ultimately the concept of yourself, who you think you are, doesn't have to be fixed in stone. Right, you've got a story that you tell yourself that comes from history, right? But it doesn't have to define who you are now. You can change that. If you've had a bad past, say somebody, I was bullied at school, that's why I'm lacking confidence now. That was fucking 40 years ago. You need to be getting over that now, and you need to tell yourself a different story. I was bullied at school, and that's made me stronger as a person today. As soon as you say it like that, it's like, oh, I've got a different story, and all we are is skin with a story that holds us together. And
why do you think people get stuck on that? Like, because people love to play almost like the victim, and it's almost like they like
you've answered your own question. Yeah. I think therapy perpetuates it, right? I think if you go to therapy, tell me about your problems, right? If you ever read Inside Out Thinking, Sydney Banks, right? He talks about going to therapy is like going into the shower to dry off. It ain't going to fucking work. How is you telling me about your problems are going to make you feel any better? I just don't get that at all. I'm better if I want to go see a therapist. I want the therapist to say, tell me what's working in your life right now. Tell me about the best thing that you've got. Tell me about the characteristics that really work for you, and let's work on those. I don't have to, personally, and I know people get upset by this because they've been in therapy for years, right? I don't have to go back 30 years and unpick my negative stuff. I'd rather leave that where it was. And I'd rather tell myself a better story. And I'd rather focus on the aspects of myself that are working in my favor right now that I can build on going forward. And if you, oh, mate, you've got, I'm doing the rant now.
I was just about to say to you, you're just as good as me when you go on a rant. But this is then the problem. It's, as you said, there's so much research going into this, but it's getting worse. And the biggest problem for me is, I'm going to get a quote from your book in a second on it, but it's a learnt behavior.
Yeah.
But people don't realize that it's a learnt behavior. that they're doing it to themselves. Again, we had Craig on 2 episodes ago, and he spoke about in Buddhism, it's like you've got the actual pain of if you stub your toe. That's life, that happens. Then you've got the second tier of pain where you then keep reliving the fact that you stub your toe and you keep replaying. And that's where people are stuck.
That's what
people
therapy
are stuck
is,
there. Yeah, people are stuck there. But the thing with therapy is I don't necessarily think it's a problem to know where it's come from, or this is where it's come from, but then they don't give you any tools to do something about it. And it's what I'm not a therapist or a counselor, because I will say shit to you that they can't say. I will give you shit to do that they won't. I'm like, and you get to the bottom of it, but you give people actionable steps to do something about it. I can say to them, you aren't fucking broken. You just need to fucking love yourself. You need to forgive yourself, and you need to move on. And it's a powerful thing to give, because we are ultimately in control of our own destiny, and people don't know this. They don't realize that they have a choice. People think they don't have a choice. They think they're stuck with this narrative, and they think they're stuck for the rest of their life. Yeah. And then they just this victim. Sorry, I say I'm going to rant again. Should we just rant for an hour?
Mate, well, you're absolutely bang on in terms of the problem with all of that, and it's all, I think, pretty much concurs with what I think anyway, is unlearning is really hard.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for a human being. So in personal development is about, here's some new stuff, go away and do it, right? It's a piece of piss, isn't it? You can go and, I'll learn about gratitude, I'll go and do that. I'll learn about yoga, I can do that. We're really good at learning to do new stuff, but it's really, really hard to stop doing bad stuff. Really, once it's baked in, once you've got stuff baked into to who you are, it's quite difficult to stop doing even the stuff that's not serving you well. Right. So ask all your listeners, right? How many thoughts do you continue to think that aren't serving you well, but you continue to think them every day? And how many habits have you got that aren't serving you well, but you continue to do those habits? And it's this stopping doing stuff is much harder than learning new stuff. So a lot of the personal development stuff is about ceasing the bad habits. As well as taking on new stuff.
But the new stuff, and here's a big thing with this, and this is where for me, when it comes to the Art of Being Brilliant, again, I read this book before I became depressed. Why did it not help me? The reason why it didn't help me is because I took no action. I didn't take any action. And this is the problem. People will read these books, and this is the problem with self-help books. Literally, you can see people that have read every single self-help book under the sun, yet they're still miserable as fuck. They're miserable as fuck because they don't apply what they're learning. So when people get this book off me, The Art of Being Fucking Brilliant, I say to them, you have to do the activities. Because there's activities at the end of the chapter, do the activities. Because if you don't do the activities and you don't learn, then you're just going to forget. You're like, oh, that was a great book. 2 weeks later, you've moved on to back onto your old habits again, doing the same old fucking shit. You're not doing any of the stuff that you've learned. And that's the problem. People don't do things. Self-help books are all the same fucking shit. It's the same fucking stuff. Andy's stuff is nothing different to what's already out there. It's how he articulates it and words it, which is what's special. But it's true. You literally use quotes from other people because it's the same stuff. And you're like, you pick it apart, but then you put your amazing spin on it and your research into it from what you've done. But it's the same core principle as everything else that's already out there. The problem is people take no fucking action and they're waiting for this magic pill.
Mate, I have to jump in.
Hit me. Let me
jump in, right?
Let me calm down.
Yeah, you're gonna have to take some deep breaths, right? But you're absolutely, again, maybe we should just call it the Ranty Podcast. But basically, I'm right. I remember doing a gig. I did a whole day Art of Being Brilliant as a workshop. Years and years ago now, when it was first invented. There's about 60 people on it. It went really well. Everybody disappears at the end of the day, 4:00, and I was putting my gear away, packing my laptop up and all that. And there's one guy stayed behind afterwards, lingering, right? And I knew he had some questions. So I said, yeah, mate, what can I do for you? He said, all that stuff, right? I've been here 9 till 4. I'm a really busy person. And he says, I've listened to you tell me stuff that I already know. He says, everything that you said, I already know it. So I said, I'm ever so sorry, fella. I've wasted your time. No, he says, I'm not having a go. He says, but I've not been doing it. So he said to me, right, so what I'm committed to making some personal change. Brilliant, fella. I said, brilliant. I started packing away again. Came back to me about 30 seconds later in his briefcase. He's got a diary. He's old like me. So he's got a paper diary, right? And this was March. It was March, right? And he said, right, Andy, stop what you're doing. You're my witness. He says, I'm going to start to be brilliant on November the 1st, right? And he literally, right, licked his finger. We're on March. He went March, April, May, June, July, August, September. He got to November the 1st and he said, Andy, watch. And he put on November the 1st, he wrote in big capital letters, start to be happy today, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And I looked at him, I said, but it's March. I said, why are you going to be happy on November the 1st? And he looked at me in all seriousness, he says, I've got a lot on. He says, I'm really proper busy at work. I'm managing a project at work. He says, but that finishes end of October. So he says, I reckon I can start being brilliant, being my best self on November the 1st. And fella, I don't know how far you can miss a point by, right? Because at no point do I ever suggest to people, oh, just be your best self on a Wednesday afternoon between 2 and 4, or let's reserve it for a week on Tuesday. I am talking about, and you are passionate about, learning to be your best self on a more consistent basis, minute by minute, for the rest of your life. And it doesn't start in November. It starts with you today, but there is action involved. And if you ask yourself why there's so many negative people, why are so many people a million miles away from feeling as great as they think, as they could, is that's because it's easier to be negative. It doesn't take any effort. As a human being, we're social creatures. We're pack animals. So we like to fit in. We have this human desire to fit in. So if you can't fit in, it's a death sentence. So you used to have to fit into your tribe. So what we do, without knowing it, we look around at what everybody else is doing and we do that. So we look around. Nobody else likes Mondays. Mondays must be shit. I'm going to hate Mondays as well. And that's it. It's baked in. Boom. A seventh of your entire life is now written off because you've followed the crowd. And what we're really saying is to be your best self. You've got to look around at what everybody else is doing and not do that.
Yeah, do the opposite.
Is pretty much the opposite. It's like, yes.
It's the exact opposite. But it's true, though, isn't it? One of the biggest things for me is we talk about this. I just want to quickly read a quote in a second about being born happy. But you reminded me of something there about why it's so hard to be happy and social media, which I read from your book about the fact, and this blew my mind a bit, that we are actually the product. Ooh. We are the product. We are not the customers.
Yeah, well, you don't pay to go on social media, do you? Who pays for social media is the people who are advertising their shit.
We are the product.
So you are the product. Your attention, specifically, your attention is the product. If they can grab your attention by some lurid headline or sleazy thing or scantily clad woman or whatever it may be that's enticing you in, click, clickbait, boom, you spent 20 minutes of your life pursuing some nonsense, and that's 20 minutes of your life you're not going to get back. You are the product. They're trying to capture your attention.
I love that.
Yes.
So I'm just going to read a quick quote, or one quote I'm going to read today from your book. And again, this comes from The Happiness Revolution. You were born curious, questioning, with a thirst for learning. We were born to play, pure potential, pure love. If you're not currently feeling it, it's not lost, just forgotten. Why have we forgotten? Why is that a thing? Because surely my logical brain says to me that most adults aren't happy. You've got these kids that are pure potential, pure happiness, pure love. Why do we try and put our negativity and our shit onto these kids?
Yeah.
I know it's not conscious. But
no, it's not conscious. But as your brain develops, basically up to age about 10, most kids are happy, although the age of depression is coming down. And you can go to primary schools. We do deliver our stuff in schools, and there's kids 8 years old having anxiety and panic now, which is weird, but they are. I always think, when did jumping in puddles become a bad idea? So if your listeners can trace back to when it became a bad idea, that's when we started to get too serious. And I know life is serious. Your brain has this somewhere between the ages of about 8 and 10, you get self-conscious, you learn self-consciousness. So up until the age of 8, you've got no idea that anybody else has got any thoughts about you at all. You're just blissfully running around the garden naked kind of thing, aren't you? You don't really appreciate that anybody's. But when you get to between the ages of 8 and 10, your brain starts to develop, and you start to develop an awareness. You start to have opinions of other people and look around and go, ooh, her bum looks a bit big in those trousers. And then as soon as you have that thought, you think, they might be thinking that about me. And that, mate, is when the world gets heavy, because your real true self, the jumping in puddles, well, I can't jump in puddles, people think I'm an idiot, right? I can't. And therefore this self-consciousness kicks in, and we start to hide our real, true, ebullient, fun-filled jumping in puddle selves, and we start to think, well, I've got to dress the same as everybody else, so nobody criticizes me. I've got to do it, and it's a conformity thing, and it's quite difficult to escape, because it's part of how your brain operates, learning to be an adult. But I think that a lot of this, we're back to self-remembering, is maybe part of the happiness thing is to start jumping in puddles again, and start building snowmen in the winter, and start being a bit of a dick, start being a bit of a kid.
But what if people judge us? What people think we're weird?
Well, you have to get over that, don't you, mate? Yeah. And I don't think most people think you're weird. Most people go, oh, wow. Yeah. It was great fun. Why am I not doing that?
Imagine jumping on a swing as an adult. Anyone that's judging you is probably thinking to themselves, God, I wish I could do that. And I love that. But isn't it funny now, as kids as well, we always rush to be want to be adults. We want to become an adult, and we're rushing to try and become an adult. Like somehow adult life is better. And it's like, kids have got it all wrong. Like one of the best times of my life was when you've got no bills to pay, no worry. You could literally just be a kid, go and play on the park with your mates. But it's like these kids like, I want to be an adult, and you get to become an adult, and it's almost like the biggest lie in history ever told, that adulthood's somehow this amazing thing. I mean, obviously there's amazing perks to be an adult, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it's like the ability to be a kid and just not give a fuck. Like what I would give to have that back of genuinely.
Can I just quick story, and then ask me about the Jonah Complex, because it's something I learned yesterday. I learned it yesterday. I did a session, right? True story. I did a session in I think it was Huddersfield or Halifax, somewhere up there, with year sixes. So they're 10 years old. They had 2 days with these kids, 60 kids crammed into one class. So 2 classes in one class. So it wasn't ideal. They were all sitting on windowsills and on carpets and stuff. And now 2 days around positive psychology with these kids. Best audience ever, right? So at the end of day 1, it had gone really well. And I said to the kids, right, so I said, tomorrow, shall we do an experiment? So basically on day 1, right, at break time, the bell went, kids went out for play. I followed the staff down the corridor into the staff room, had a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit. And while I was having my cup of tea and my ginger biscuit, I looked out the staff room window, and there's 300 kids out there having the bloody time of their life, right? Playing football, playing stuck in the mud, playing TIG, running around, acting stuff out, just having a brilliant thing. And then somebody rings a bell, right? One of the lunchtime super, and the kids have to freeze like that, right? And then she rings the bell again, which releases them from that. And they get to line up back into their class lines. And it's almost like, right, you've had your fun. Now put your serious face on, because there's some top heavy fractions on the board when you get back in. So they get them back under control, and they line them back into class, right? So my kids came back into class, and I said to them, right, I said, oh my gosh, kids, I've been watching you out there, having the time of your life. So now I'm back again tomorrow. So let's do a world first tomorrow, right? So at break time tomorrow, what if I arrange it so that me and you lot, we go in the staff room and we send the staff out for playtime. So let's just do it differently. And the kids go, can you do that? I said, look, I'll give it a go, right? So I had a word with the head teacher, who wasn't keen, by the way, but I persuaded her, said, if you want me back tomorrow, we're going to have to do this, because I've promised the kids. So I rock up on the Friday. The kids were already there. Kids were in school an hour early. This never happens, right? It never happens. They're banging on the door, waiting to get into school because they're so excited. Bell goes for morning break, and the kids look at me. Is it happening? I said, it's happening. There's this massive cheer. Pied Piper, I'm like the Pied Piper down the corridor. Me and 60 kids congering down the corridor into the staff room. 45 staff out into the playground, right? Now, what I didn't realize is every single member of staff has gone outdoors. So it's me and 60 kids with a kettle and some biscuits. And it's not good, sugar and all that. And it got a bit out of control. So I had to distract them somehow. So I said to the kids, I said, halfway through, I said, okay, kids, oh my gosh, put all that hot water down. Look out the window. And they all rushed over to the window, all the noses up like that, looking out. And we looked out onto the playground, and there's 45 adults out there, stood there in the playground like this. Right, there's no looking at the watches and drinking the coffee, but there's no TIG, there's no stuck in the mud, there's no football, there's no conkers, there was no acting stuff out, Dungeons and Dragons. They were standing there looking at the watch. And one of these little girls, Jessica, said, Andy, she said, look at the adults. She said, why are they not playing? And I said, I'm not sure, Jess. I think they might have just forgotten. And I think that, mate, is probably as close to the truth you will ever get. Is we were all that kid at some point. We've been that child, and now we've become the adult who stands there and has forgotten how to have fun and how to be playful. So it's a big deal. It's a really big deal, is to get back in touch with just being a bit more childlike. I think there's a top tip right there.
So how do we do that then? Because again, people can be really resistant to this. My audience listening to this will be like, "Oh, I'd love to do that, Andy. That sounds amazing." But how? Well, how would you do that?
Well, you would just do it, wouldn't you? I mean, I can't give people instructions on how to be more playful. Is just engage with the moment a bit more. What you'll find is kids spend hours just colouring and playing Lego and stuff. I'm not saying you have to buy colouring books and buy Lego.
But even that, though, I don't think people would even think of being... It's that simple. When was the last time people bought a colouring book? Anyway, you told me to mention about the Jonah Complex.
Oh, if I can remember it. I only learned it yesterday, and it's absolutely... It stunned me. It stunned me. Right, I'm not a religious person, right? But apparently Jonah, in biblical terms, Jonah was a very timid merchant who declined God's offer for him to do big work, right? So you need to understand who Jonah was, right? And essentially, there's something called the Jonah Complex. I literally learned this yesterday, right? I'm a learning junkie. I love learning. The Jonah Complex essentially is something that says that we're scared of being our best selves. There's a kind of a hidden fear of stepping up to the plate and shining, right? Because there's first of all, the fear of what if I'm an extraordinary human being, what will people think? Is that the done thing? Won't they think I'm big-headed? Or maybe there's a bit of effort involved, or maybe I'm going to have to stand out from the crowd and it's a bit scary to be my best self. And therefore, because of this Jonah complex, then what happens is we find it easier and safer to play small. All right. So the fear of us achieving our full potential is too scary. So we lower the personal bar and we aim to play small. And I just think I kind of get it. I understand that. And the thing I did yesterday, I was thinking back to, I did a session with some kids, 12-year-olds. And I asked them a question. I said, right, because it's about raising, what they wanted was to raise your aspirations, because it's from a low income community where there's not much aspiration. Nobody's going to go to uni. They don't. So what they wanted was, come on, let's get them to think differently. So I said, right, you lot, age 12, whatever you are, who's going to be prime minister one day? And these kids are like, whoa, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. Well, somebody's going to have to do that. Somebody's going to have to set their bar so high that they're going to run the country. So I said, why not you? And they're going, well, nobody from our school has ever been prime minister before. I said, that's not the point. Why not you? And one of the girls said, well, I'm hoping to be an engineer. So I said to her, okay, well, why would you ever set out to be a mediocre engineer? Why would you set out to be anything other than the best engineer that you possibly can be? And that got them all to think about what's really stopping us, what's really holding us back is the Jonah complex. It's ourselves, getting in our own way. We're scared of being ourselves at our best, which is weird.
My favorite quote, I've just pulled it up while you were talking, from Nelson Mandela.
Marianne Williamson quote.
Yes. Oh, is it? Nelson Mandela. Yeah.
Nelson Mandela said it. Yeah. Go for it. Go for it.
Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who are we to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are we not to be? You are a child of God. You playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just within us, it is in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. We are liberated from our own fear. Our presence automatically liberates others. That's one of my favorite quotes, and that you just maybe had to say that.
Amen to that. That is the Jonah complex, explained by her and by Nelson Mandela much better than I just did it. But I think the fact that we're scared of being our best selves is a bit counterintuitive. But I can see how it's easier not to be your best self. It's easier not to shine. It's easier not to stand out. It's easier not to be prime minister.
It's easier. People like to do the easiest route. Now, I've got one more quote here before I want to get onto the happiness chart. So again, from the same book, The Happiness Revolution. The modern world has bent over backwards to give us what we thought we wanted, and yet it has somehow driven a wedge between us and happiness. Our relationship with happiness has become strained and in some cases annulled. It's not unusual to feel divorced from our mental health. Like a difficult marriage breakup, you get custody of happiness every other weekend, and if you're super lucky, you might get access to happiness for a whole week in the summer. Honestly, that absolutely floored me, because that perfectly summarizes, I think, people's relationship with happiness, and people will understand that. That to me is it. People are struggling so much with happiness and struggling with change, which is also what you hit a lot on this in the book about change. We are not meant to be changing as much as we are, and it's the world that's changed around us. We have not changed. The world around us has changed, and we just haven't kept up because we're still in that prehistoric thing. That
makes sense to me. Being divorced from your happiness and only getting access to happiness every other weekend is quite clever. It must have been one of Paul McGee's sentences, I suspect.
that was the problem with this. I was just like, I was getting these questions like, please be Andy's quote, because obviously
it was my quote, mate. It was my quote.
We won't get to Paul.
But no, we try. I'll get Paul on your podcast next. By the way, he's a great talker.
I've got his book literally next to me as well.
I'll get it. I'll put a good word in. I mean, he'd love to do it. He likes to rant as well. I think in terms of being divorced from your happiness and visiting happiness at weekends, we call it destination addiction. Destination addiction is that you're kicking your happiness into the long grass. I'll be happy at the weekend. I'll be happy at Christmas. I'll be happy. And even kids get that, right? Kids.
Yeah,
I did
yeah.
a session. It's all kids with me, but I did a session with kids, and I think they were about 9 years old. And it was I also write kids books, so I was the kind of keynote speaker at this big book event, and I was sitting at the back with some girls on the girls' table at the back with these 9-year-olds. And the teacher was doing a bit of an intro, and this little girl next to me, right? And you're East Midlands, you'll get it, right? She had a mard. She had a mard on,
Oh.
right? Some people won't understand what that is, right? But
like a tantrum, like a little tantrum.
Yeah, she's like, she's like giving it. Oh my gosh! And I said to her, I said, "What's the matter with you?" She says, "Oh, I've had enough." I said, "What do you mean you've had enough?" She says, I said, "What have you had enough of?" She says, "I've had enough of everything." And she looked at me like big brown eye. She says, "I can't wait to retire." I'm like, bloody hell! She's 9. She's 9 years old, right? She's kicking her happiness into the long grass 60 years away. And where she learned that, right? She's learned that from the big people in her life who've learned to hate Mondays and come alive on Fridays, who are grumbling. I've got this saying about parenting, right? Parenting is your children won't do what you say, all right? If you've got kids, you'll know that's true, but they will do what you do. So this is why being your best self becomes super important, because the best thing you will ever do for your own family and your own kids is be your best self, right? Because they will look at you and they will say, okay, confidence, happy, passionate, positivity, that's the way it is it? And then we'll just become baked into them early. And it's not a guarantee, but it's one of the biggest thing you'll ever do for your kids is be the best version of you on a day-to-day basis.
I use that so much when it comes to people coming to sit down with me, and I'm trying to get people to get a grip of their life, essentially. Like, it's normally from a fat loss perspective, but just as a whole, I'll say, do it for your kids. And I'd be like, how much do you care about your kids? And like, I love it. It's like, so then you kind of owe it to them to teach them good habits. It says, yeah, but I do. And it says, yeah, but you're not eating. Or when you are eating, you're eating shit. And I'll say to them, kids pick up on that. Yeah. So if you want to set a good example, you have to do it for your kids. And I will literally be that ruthless with them, because parents will do, especially mothers, will do anything for their kids. And my ultimate goal is to get the mum or the parent in that good place. So I will use their kids against them. I don't care if it makes me a fucking arsehole, because it works. But it's ultimately, you've got to do what you've got to do to try and help the people. So I love that you've said that.
I agree. And I think it's kind of slightly emotional blackmail, but if that's what it takes,
try and help them.
And you can't be asked to do it for yourself, right? Well, do it for your kids. I like it a lot. I talk about there's lots of things in terms of family, but particularly the ripple effect. There's lots of stats on contagion of emotions, and numbers off the top of me, it might not be quite the right numbers, but something like so essentially, as human beings, we are wired. What my PhD was really about is about what I call flourishing, and flourishing is when your happiness is bigger than you. So we're back to that handful of people you can think of who make you feel good just by being in the same room as you. Is they've got this kind of emotional uplifting effect, which is what I call them the 2%ers, right? It's flourishing, but that leaks out of you. So if you've got, so happiness is contagious, essentially. So something like, if you've got a happy friend, you will be 14% happier because you got that person in your life. If you've got a happy brother or sister, you will be 17% happier. And here's the big one: if you've got a happy next door neighbor, you will be 34% happier because you live next to them. So my big thing is, if you can't be asked to be happy and positive for yourself, do it for your friends, do it for your family, and do it for your community, because that's what they need as well.
But it goes the opposite way. So I love about this. So energy transfer. I talk about this a lot when it comes to energy transfer, and I'm massive on law of attraction, energy in the universe, and all that sort of stuff. I am, whether you believe it or not, I don't really give a fuck. Like, the science backs it up now. Like, it's a thing. Yeah. So when it comes to energy transfer, that's all it is. It's energy transfer. But then it works the opposite way with mood hoovers. And again, I learned that term from you. I use it all the time, but it came from you. I always give you credit for it. Don't worry. But the thing is, you walk into a room, and every single person knows what it's like when you walk into a room, or sorry, someone walks into a room and straight away the energy dips. Yeah. They are a mood hoover. That is energy. They are sapping the energy from you. So all Andy's talking about there is the opposite. You can pass your energy on. So when I'm talking to people, you'll know this as a public speaker. I've not been fortunate enough to do it on the scale that you have. But when I've got people in front of me now, on this podcast, all I'm doing is energy transfer. It's just energy transfer. I'm trying to pass on my positivity, my happiness in this moment onto the audience. And again, I do it through rants and passion, whatever it is, but it's just energy transfer. So that's all you've hit on there. That happiness is just energy transferred to people. So why would you not want to be that best version of yourself to raise your family up to be one of those 2%ers? So let's just talk about these 2%ers, because this is interesting. So you've talked about here about a happiness chart. And if I may, I'm going to get Mikey to pop it up on the screen for the audience to see that. But essentially, you'll see at the top part, you've got the 2%ers. So who are these 2%ers? We spoke about this on the intro. Who are these 2%ers, and how can we be like them?
Okay, yeah. Well, the 2%ers are the people I spoke about at the start. These are the ones we've ignored for 150 years on the grounds of them feeling amazing. All right, so they're not worth investigating because they don't need pills, they don't need medication, they don't need therapy. They're just going through life, getting on with it, largely with a smile on their face. And there aren't enough of them. We've ignored them for it. So I call them the 2%ers because statistically there's not enough of them. So that's why I think we can all only maybe think of a handful in our life who are genuinely upbeat and positive. So if we rate you on a scale of 1 to 10, these are the ones towards the top end of that well-being scale. Now, they also happen to have loads more energy and loads more positivity. They do stuff, they go the extra. There's loads of benefits to it. But essentially what they're not feeling amazing by accident. So what I did at Loughborough was I sought them out through various means, and I did a research project on finding out why they're feeling amazing and what can we learn from them. And I promise you, they're not feeling amazing by accident. They're feeling amazing because they've got strategies that allow them to feel amazing. And that's where the Art of Being Brilliant comes in, and all our books and our workshops are about those strategies, really. So now, guys, just while I'm thinking about it, before we do the strategies, can I just go back to the emotional transfer? Because essentially that is my specialism.
Right? Let's go. I was worried you thought I was going to be nuts then. I thought you were going to be like, what the fuck's this going about?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. Nobody ever asked me about it, but it's really, really important to me, this flourishing thing, and you're right, emotions can transfer. Well, you cannot not have an impact on the people around you, right? So your emotions are going to spread. So the question is, what am I passing on is a really big deal. And I might get it wrong because I've not done it for a while, but there's a guy called Kim Cameron, who's one of the American sort of gurus of all this. He talks about different kinds of energy. So you're particularly into physical energy, right? So physical energy is something that gets depleted during the day, calorific energy.
Yep.
So what you'll do is your physical energy gradually winds down during the day until you haven't got any left, then you go to sleep, right? But it gradually gets depleted. Same with emotional energy. Emotional energy, you expend emotional energy by feeling emotions. So when you're feeling down all the time, that depletes your energy. But actually, feeling overly happy all the time is also knackering. If you imagine next time when you go to a wedding and you're like high all day, you're having a great time, you're knackered, right? It wears you out, right? So emotional energy also is depleting. There's also something you call psychological energy, which is when you're drained by things like, for me, it's things like spreadsheets and stuff that I don't really do very well. And I'm like, whoa. So physical, emotional, psychological, they all get depleted during the day. And there's only one form of energy that replenishes you, and it's what he calls relational energy. And relational energy comes from mixing with people who are upbeat and positive. So straight away, you can be in a meeting with positive people, and you can leave that meeting re-energized and renewed and refreshed. And it's fantastic, isn't it? That's the best way of regenerating yourself during the day, is have a chat with somebody who's a 2%er. So I think it's really, I think that's really interesting that everything else, your energy gradually depletes during the day, but you can plug yourself back into the mains by interacting with people like Dan James.
I love that. And this is the interesting with this. I speak this about Mikey. There's been 2 podcasts I've done. I did one with a guy called Dr. Rob Bukowski last week, and it was late at night, it was 7 p.m. It was the second podcast I've done in the same day. So obviously that's a lot of energy transfer. Yeah. I was fucked.
Yeah.
I was fucked. I said to Mikey, I was not feeling it. As soon as he came on, he had this beaming smile. That was it. I was gone, and that was it. And I then didn't sleep that night because I was so buzzing. And it's the same thing that's happened now. Like I literally, when Mikey came in, no word of a lie, Mikey came in, and I was taking a nap on the floor. And all day I've been nervous about this. I'm like, I've got Andy Cope on. I says, it's like when you meet your idol, like this guy that's like this basically helps you become who you are. I was really nervous. I don't tend to get nervous. I'm just taking a nap to rejuvenate my energy. But as soon as you start talking here, absolutely fine. That's what it is. I didn't know that's what it was. Obviously, I know about physical energy.
Relational energy, mate.
Love that. I didn't even know that was a thing. I know about emotional, psychological, physical. I didn't even know that was a way to recharge. So then let's talk about strategies for these 2%ers. So again, obviously, I want people to buy your book, but off the top of your head, if you're going to give people 2 strategies to basically try and help them become a 2%er, off the top of your head, what could you think of?
Okay, top of the head, the ones that work for me the most and it's a long-standing thing. I think it might have gone in the original Art of Being Brilliant book. Is the key thing that comes out of my research is also the most obvious thing in the world, by the way, is consciously and deliberately choosing to have a positive attitude, right? And I know that when I trot that out, people going, 12 years to find that out, mate. I think we already bloody knew that 12 years ago. But I don't think actually we did. I really don't think we did. I certainly hadn't really considered that the plot spoiler, mate, is that I can't control COVID. I can't make the pandemic go away, and I can't make the sunshine, and I can't even make the buses run on time. All of those things are out of my control. But what positive psychology and the conscious choice to have a positive attitude does is put me a bit more in control over me. And by choosing to have a positive attitude won't change the world, but it'll change my world. And if it can change my world just enough to put me in a better place to deal with a pandemic and a rainy day and a late bus, then that's as much as you can get out of it, right? So the question is, how do we choose to have a positive attitude? And my breakthrough was in 2008. I was reading a book on mindfulness, and one of the sentences said, what you need to do is wake up in the morning being really grateful that you've not got toothache. And
is that Tich in your hand?
I don't know. Yeah, it might have been. It might have been.
Yeah,
I can remember reading it and I remember reading it and thinking, that sounds stupid. Well, waking up in the morning, not having toothache, that sounds ridiculous, but I'll give it a go. And I did it. And I didn't just do it once, mate. I did it every day for 365 days. I didn't miss a day. And it's not a natural thought. I'm not going to I've got to force that thought at 6 a.m. on a Monday in the dark. And I get out of bed every day, right? No word of a lie. And I'd go, oh my gosh, here we go again. Oh, hang on, hand to jaw. Hang on a second. Oh, fantastic. No toothache. What a great start to the day. So straight away, I feel much better. I've got a spring in my step. When my kids came down for breakfast, I've got some music on. I'm dancing around, serving the toast with a smile. Kids were happier, right? Remember that happiness leakage. Kids went off to school much happier. They smashed school, right? They overperformed at school massively because they were happy. They were happy because dad was happy. I was happy because I didn't have toothache. And nobody knew, because it was entirely played out in secret in my head. And I have to tell you, mate, I'm quite evangelical about this, because that's not a big academic thing. That's such a lucky thing that worked for me. I came alive, right? I had the energy of two people. I got promoted at work 6 times in 1 year, right, in 2008, because I was rocking up on a Monday, genuinely wanting to be there, where on Monday, most people already were looking forward to Friday. But I was like, boom, in the zone. Everything that I thought I couldn't do previously in my life in 2008, it seemed doable. I just cracked on with stuff. I just got so much done. I felt great. My relationships were off the scale. So I did it every day for a year. And then the next year I upgraded to kidneys for a bit, because I just thought I'd freshen it up. So getting out of bed at 6 a.m, giving your kidneys a rub and going, ooh, you little beauties, keeping me alive. And I know that that's not everybody's cup of tea. And some people think, can't be that bloody simple. And I say, what if it is, right? What if, totally by accident, I'd learned how to choose to be positive? And mate, it's not toothache and kidneys, really. The message, I think, really is that one day I'm not going to be able to get out of bed at all. Yeah. One day, the truth, bottom line, one day I'm going to be too ill or too old. So while I can get out of bed, what the conscious kind of choice to be positive means is that I may as well get out of bed like I really mean it.
And you're showing gratitude as well.
Yeah, gratitude as well. It's gratitude as well. That's exactly what it is, fella. Yeah. So gratitude is the other one. I think the other one is, if you wanted to, so not having toothache really helped me massively. I don't have to do it anymore. But I had to do it for about 1.5 years until it became baked in as a kind of thing. The other one would be, if you get people to think about the top 10 happiest moments of their life, which is quite a big deal because you'll have loads. But if you honed it down to the top 10, I would hazard a guess that all of those will be experiences with people that you love, probably with no Wi-Fi. And therefore, my top tip, I think, is to have more experiences. So don't stop chasing the product, stop chasing the Amazon deliveries, and spend that money instead on doing something with people that you love, like picnics and barbecues, and it's just stuff that gets you out and does stuff and has experiences with people you love, because those little things will all add up to a big thing called happiness.
I absolutely love that. 2 things there: love and happiness. But love and gratitude, and that is the key to happiness. Love and gratitude, and you basically nailed on the head both of them. And again, it's interesting. I talk about this on most of my episodes. Just listen to what my guests say. They've all got patterns. So again, we spoke to Dr. Bob, and what did he say just first thing in the morning? He shows gratitude, and he thinks of someone that he loves. It's the same thing. It's the same principle. You're waking up and you're putting that positivity out there. And again, we speak about this before. Again, we spoke about this off air, Andy, when you said you to my Buddhism wheel thing. But it's like, people don't think they have a choice. You do have a choice. And when you plant that new thought inside your head, it leads to new feelings. New thoughts lead to new feelings, which lead to new actions, which over time will compound up and change your life. It's that compounding effect, small changes. And that's all it is. Each day, how do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One step at a time. All these fucking quotes you see, it's telling you how to basically win the day. Just win the day. How do you win the day? Get the fuck up and just be grateful that you are awake. Because again, I was talking about Richard Wilkins. He says on the course I went on, again, wake up, move your arms to the side.
Yeah, if you can't feel the wood.
Can't feel the wood, it means you're alive. Happy days. But whatever it is, just show a bit of gratitude. Andy, I'm really cautious of your time, so I've got one final question to ask you. And it's what I ask all my guests. What advice would you give to somebody that feels stuck and out of control in their life right now?
And there are a lot of those people, to be fair. I think if you just downgrade it a bit and just, I think it's got to have empathy for people who are really struggling at the moment. Personally, I've really enjoyed lockdown. It's forced me to slow down, and I've reconnected with family nature, and I've enjoyed not having to commute and all that. But I know some people have hated it, and some people are very lonely. So I would say there is an element of those three little words: you are enough. Right? Even when you think you're not, you really are. I know it's hard to believe sometimes, but you are enough. All the resources you ever needed to have a fantastic life are already inside you. The matter is, the challenge is to find them and to tell yourself a better story. But there are people struggling, and even happy people struggle at some point. Everybody, some mad statistic like 1 in 3 people are going to have some sort of mental health problem at some point in their life. So it will strike a lot of people. But even when you think you're not enough, you absolutely are.
That's the one thing I also love about you, especially in your latest book with Paul McGee, again, Happiness Revolution. You never ever claim to be perfect. You are literally a doctor of happiness, and you very rightly say that you don't always have good days. And that's what I love about you, because I don't have, nobody on this planet is happy 24/7, 365. And you wouldn't want to be. You even mentioned that in the book. You wouldn't want to be. You don't want to be happy at a fucking funeral. Like, it just makes no sense. You don't be happy when your favourite football team loses.
I'm a Derby County fan, mate. It's the biggest blight on my life. I thought you were going to take the piss much more than you actually have.
Oh, do you know why? It's because I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. I actually said to three people today, I said, the first thing I'm going to do is rip him about the 2019 playoff finals where Aston Villa, which is my team, beat you guys. So, but my thing with that is, I just want to quickly summarize that. We said about you are enough. So everyone knows that I do my affirmations in the morning. Again, I've got loads of these things. The last thing that I say is, I'm in the process of, and I basically turn around and the last thing I say is, I am enough. And that's non-negotiable for me. Yeah. It's an absolute, I don't need to try and convince myself I'm enough. I am enough. And I think if people can realize that and just have that small grain of light just to realize that they are enough and hold on to that, it's going to make a massive, massive difference. And I'm so glad you said that, because I don't think any of my guests have actually said that and used those words. You are enough at the end. So I'm really, really glad. Michael Lozier, that's his name. Fucking hell, that was going to annoy me. Michael Lozier, the Law of Attraction. That's where I learned it from, the affirmations. But the biggest thing for me is I'm enough. It's an absolute non-negotiable. So I'm so glad you said that. Cool. That's a game changer. So where can people find out more about you? Again, we're going to put all the links in the show notes for the books, but where can people find out more about you and everything that you do?
Yeah, we've got artofbrilliance.co.uk. That's our sort of businessy website. And we've got Brilliant Schools, brilliant.school, which is our education website. So we're trying to get this on the curriculum. That's the thing I'm going to do before I die, mate. We'll have positive psychology, teaching kids this stuff so that it can be more resilient and happier. And then all the books are on Amazon. If you put Andy Cope into Amazon, there'll be a whole load of books. All, as you said, on exactly the same subject, just trying to come up with a slightly different way of saying the same bloody thing.
They are brilliant. Honestly, they are. The Art of Brilliance is, again, brilliant. And like I said, the second book, like I said, people that know me, I'm dyslexic. I struggle to read. My birthday was June the 9th. This book came out June the 10th. So it's been a perfect birthday present for myself. I literally didn't realize you had a new book out until I was researching you on Saturday. I thought, for fuck's sake. So I literally then had to buy the book. It came on Sunday, and for people listening, it's now Wednesday, and I've not put the book down since. And that tells you something about me, my ability to read, and the fact that I have smashed it out. So honestly, Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You have been absolutely everything I knew you would be. Do you know when you say about meeting people that they're like almost like your heroes and they let you down? You most certainly haven't. If anything, I think you're even cooler than I thought, because you're exactly how I imagined you to be. And that's the most important thing for me is when you read in these books and people write these things and you see them in real life, you think, fuck's sake, you're not like that. but you genuinely are. You are these books. How you are and how you come across in the books is the same person, and that is a rarity to find these days. So again, I know I've done a lot of bigging you up, but I genuinely mean that. It's been a pleasure,
mate. Thanks for that. No, it's been great, and I think we'd like to say right at the start, we're in the same business as just trying to nudge people towards being a better version of themselves, physically, emotionally, mentally, the whole package.
Andy, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.